Good afternoon, good morning, distinguished participant. My name is Adam Adiwinata, and it is an honor for me to be with you today in this Singapore International Energy Week Roundtable, the Global Renewable Outlook, Key Technologies and Trends for the Energy Transformation. I will be the MC for the event today, and allow me to thank the organizer of SIEW for organizing such a very interesting event given this current circumstances, and to thank them to allow us to organize this roundtable. As well as I would like to welcome the participants. We have over 500 participants from ASEAN and beyond. Thank you very much for being with us today. I would like to also extend the warm welcome to the Director of IRENA Innovation and Technology Center, Dolph Gillen, to the Executive Director of ASEAN Center for Energy, Dr. Nuki Agia Utama, as well as to the Director External Relation Department, Energy Planning and the Development Division, Energy Market Authority of Singapore, as well as to the UK COP Ambassador for Asia Pacific and South Asia, Ambassador Ken O'Flaherty, for joining us in this roundtable today, as well as to all of the speakers, moderators, and panelists. Thank you very much for joining us today. I will briefly outline the agenda for the event. The event will be commenced with the opening remarks from IRENA, from ASEAN Center for Energy and Energy Market Authority, continued with the presentation from IRENA on the Global Renewables Outlook, ASEAN Center for Energy on the ASEAN Energy Outlook 6, which will be released next month, and by the COP26 on the key role of renewable for climate and implication for COP26. This will be followed with the two panel discussion on the country level and regional level perspective on energy transformation in ASEAN. So without further ado, it is with my pleasure to invite the Director of IRENA Innovation and Technology Center, Dolph Gillen, to give his welcoming remarks. Director Gillen, the floor is yours.
Yes, thank you very much, Adam. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, it's my great pleasure to extend a warm welcome to all of you joining us today. Thank you to the organizers of this year's Singapore International Energy Week for inviting IRENA to organize a roundtable on energy transformation. I would like to thank Dr. Nuki Agia Utama, the Executive Director of the ASEAN Center for Energy, and Mr. Jonathan Goh, the Director, External Relations Department, Energy Planning and Development Division in the Energy Market Authority of Singapore, for sharing the floor with me today. And I would like to express our deep appreciation to the UK Presidency of COP26 and COP26 Regional Ambassador for Asia Pacific and South Asia, Ken O'Flaherty, for joining us. We'd also like to thank Dr. Tarinya Supasa of the ASEAN Center for Energy for also providing views on the outlook from ACE on energy in ASEAN. Finally, thank you to all panelists for taking part in our discussions later in this session. Your expertise and views are very welcome and will surely enrich our discussion today. IRENA attaches great importance to the Southeast Asia region. As one of the fastest growing regions in the world, ASEAN is crucial to global energy transformation. It is powered by sustainable and affordable renewable energy and the achievement of the Paris Agreement goals. The region stands at crossroads in terms of its collective energy future. It's therefore timely to consider economic recovery based on sustainable energy in line with a climate-proof future that is economically prosperous, secure, and socially inclusive. In this context, the nationally determined contributions, NDCs, of the Paris Agreement and the Global Sustainability Agenda and the Sustainable Development Goals constitute important milestones for the coming decade. Ladies and gentlemen, over the past decade, we have witnessed a fundamental change in the energy sector and accelerated deployment of renewables. Our latest report on renewable power generation costs revealed that more than half of the renewable capacity added in 2019 achieved lower electricity costs than new coal, with solar PV and wind being the cheapest sources of electricity in many markets. Increasingly, new renewables are cheaper even than existing coal plants. Such reduction in technology costs, coupled with the strong political will and enabling policy framework, has led to a rapid deployment of renewable energy across the globe. And we see also accelerating deployment in the ASEAN region. But more needs to be done. We hope that the dialogue today will help to identify new opportunities and strategies. Based on our Memorandum of Understanding with ASEAN, IRENA will further deepen its engagement with all the ASEAN stakeholders to support the energy transition in the region and enhanced climate action in the coming years, I wish everyone a fruitful discussion today, and I look forward to the outcomes. This concludes my remarks. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Director Keller, for the welcome remarks. Now I would like to invite Dr. Nuki Agia Utama as the Executive Director for ASEAN Center for Energy to deliver his welcoming remarks. Over to you, Dr. Nuki.
Thank you, Adam. Good morning and good afternoon. Distinguished delegates, distinguished panelists, Your Excellencies, Dr. Dolph Gillen, the Director Innovation and Technology Center, International Renewable Energy Agency, IRENA, Mr. Jonathan Goh, Director External Relations Department, Energy Planning and Development Division, Energy Market Authority, Singapore, Mr. Ken O'Flaherty, UK COP26 Ambassador for Asia Pacific and South Asia. Ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of the ASEAN Center for Energy, it is my great pleasure to welcome you all to the SIEW Roundtable on Global Renewables Outlook, a key technologies and trends for the energy transformation. I wish to express my gratitude to IRENA for having us today to share the preview of our upcoming 6th ASEAN Energy Outlook that's scheduled to be launched next month at the 38th AMEM. This Outlook and the IRENA Global Renewables Outlook are two important reports at this time when countries are preparing for pandemic recovery plans. This roundtable indeed is a timely event to share insight into RE as part of the economic stimulus package. Apart from that, our upcoming 6th ASEAN Energy Outlook will also be served as a foundation for the long-term ASEAN RE Outlook, a study that to be developed in collaboration with IRENA. Ladies and gentlemen, under the Vietnam's 2020 ASEAN chairmanship, the ASEAN Summit reiterated the directive of cross-cutting issues on energy transition and sustainable climate, which are the mandate elements under the ASEAN Community Blueprint. Therefore, ASEAN is also committed to implementing the UN Sustainable Development Goals and also the Paris Agreement. For regional energy cooperation, the ASEAN Summit reaffirmed the commitment to enhance energy security in the region, provide energy for socio-economic development, promote energy accessibility, and ensuring sustainability for all. This will be achieved under the ASEAN Plan of Action for Energy Cooperation, or APAC, a 10-year plan from 2016 to 2025, which we are currently at the final year of Phase 1. Moving towards the APAC Phase 2, we will have a sub-theme of accelerating energy transition and strengthening energy resilience through greater innovation and cooperation. Therefore, the energy transition for sustainable development is a key priority under the ASEAN Energy Cooperation Framework. As you may know, under the APAC, ASEAN set a RE aspirational target as 23% in the total primary energy supply by 2025. While we are progressing, we need another 5% of RE share in reaching the target. Furthermore, the IRENA's Global Renewables Outlook 2020 revealed that under the scenario of keeping the global warming to well below 2 degrees Celsius, the region would need about 41% RE shares in TPS and 53% RE shares in the power generation in 2030. Moreover, another latest report by the IRENA on power generation costs found that renewable power generation costs have fallen sharply over the past decade. The roles of RE in balancing the energy trilemma need to be further enhanced, whether for energy security, energy equity, or to address the challenges of environmental sustainability. The socio-economic benefits of more RE deployment, such as job creation, are important to ensure the ASEAN inclusive growth. All of these imply that not only RE is a decarbonization solution, but also could form a key component of economic stimulus packages in the wake of COVID-19 pandemic. Southeast Asia is richly endowed with renewable energy source. However, they are distributed unevenly across the region. With regard to this, regional energy cooperation is crucial in accelerating RE deployment. ACE will continue to assist and support the implementation of APEC and work together with our dialogue partners and international organizations for a low carbon transition in this region. I thank IRENA for inviting ACE to be part of this roundtable dialogue. We are grateful for your continued support for ASEAN energy development. I believe the Outlook report from ACE and IRENA will provide ASEAN energy sector with insight into the future-oriented policy framework, a regional energy policy framework that will take into account the climate-related risks to capitalize on the RE sector. I wish you good health during this pandemic period. Thank you. Back to you again, Adam.
Thank you very much, Dr. Nuki. Now I would like to invite Director Go for his welcoming remarks from Energy Market Authority of Singapore. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Adam. And welcome to everybody, and especially my friends Dolph and Panuki who have just spoken. Thank you for your strong support. And today, actually, we have many key partners that we've been working with, at SIEW and many other different platforms over the years. So I won't be able to read everybody's names, but thank you very much for supporting and be present today and to be involved in this very important topic discussion. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, colleagues, good afternoon from Singapore. Thank you very much to IRENA first for hosting this important think tank roundtable at SIEW 2020. If you allow me, I would also like to take this opportunity to thank our partners and sponsors for their strong support and to everyone for participating virtually today. In particular, we're glad and very happy to have Mr. Matthew Friedman, Chief Digital Officer, Sembcorp Industries, joining us today. Sembcorp Industries have been a strong partner of SIEW over the years and been sponsoring this particular event, the SIEW Think Tank Roundtable, since 2011. Hence, you see that, in our background, virtual Zoom view, there's a Sembcorp this way, I think, this one here. We also like to take this opportunity to thank Mr. Bernard Salha, Senior EVP of R&D, EDF Group, for taking time to participate in this roundtable. And of course, we are very happy to have Dr. Sanjayan from SEDA, a long friend, also participating in today's discussion. Hi to everybody. Now, today's topic for discussion is not only timely, but extremely important for the immediate and long-term outlook of renewable energy in Southeast Asia. The future of renewable energy is multifaceted and hinges on many factors such as policy frameworks, financing, technological developments, and wider public support. To this, we may add the factors of external unpredictable shocks, such as the COVID-19 pandemic. In this light, IRENA's efforts to chart projections and to put forth concrete recommendations for this region through its Global Renewable Energy Outlook 2020 and other extensive engagements in the region will go a long way to shape our renewable energy future. For example, I'll take this opportunity again to thank Mr. Michael Renner, Program Officer Policy IRENA, who readily shared his perspectives at a special session of the 19th Regional Energy Policy and Planning Subsector Network at the ASEAN meeting chaired by Singapore in August 2020. Now, Singapore stands ready with everyone to contribute to many green developments. Our Minister of Trade and Industry, Mr. Chan Chun Sing, announced at SIEW this Monday our vision to be the bright green spark for the world. Now, this marks really the next chapter of our Singapore energy story. To give everybody a sense of what this bright green spark is about, Minister Chan announced several concrete deliverables and initiatives that we will be embarking in the next few years, or immediately, in fact. Now, this includes our intention to begin trials for electricity imports from Peninsular Malaysia, accelerating our solar PV and deployment target to 1.5 gigawatt peak by 2025. It means we're bringing forward our target with a hit at least 2 gigawatt peak by 2030. We now have a grant to pilot Singapore's first ever floating energy storage systems. We have also announced a $49 million low carbon energy research funding initiative to support research, development, and demonstration projects such as hydrogen over the next 5 years. On Tuesday, the second day of SIEW, Singapore's Minister of Sustainability and the Environment, Grace Fu, emphasized these commitments at the Asia Clean Energy Summit, reiterating our commitments to improving energy efficiency and clean energy solutions. Now, the key to such initiatives lie in strong and robust private partner collaborations on financing, R&D, and technological deployments. These initiatives also echo the message of IRENA Director General Francesco Lacamera at SIEW this year, when he mentioned that every $1 million invested in renewable energy creates 25 jobs, which is 3 times more than what we can see in traditional energy investments. Indeed, investing in renewable energy is critical for our sustainability goals, energy security, and resilience and long-term economic outlook. Now, Singapore will work with all of you, all the regional and international counterparts to accelerate advancements in renewable energy in the region and beyond. This week, Singapore signed a memorandum of understanding with Australia to drive low emissions solutions. Yesterday, the Energy Market Authority of Singapore signed 2 MOUs, first with the Energy Commission of Malaysia, second with the Electric and Mechanical Services Department of Hong Kong, to also advance cooperation on the energy front, including on the renewable energy. We also signed a statement of agreement, a joint statement of to cooperate with the United Kingdom, specifically with Ofgem, on many of these important energy issues. At the same time, we are working very closely with IRENA, with IEA, and also with all our ASEAN counterparts to develop the ASEAN Plan of Action and Energy Cooperation, Phase 2, 2021 and 2025, which will be endorsed at the upcoming 38th ASEAN Ministers on Energy meeting in November this year. With this, I once again thank IRENA for your strong support to engage deeply with ASEAN, and I wish everyone a most fruitful discussion today. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Director Goh, for the kind words. Ladies and gentlemen, I believe now we have all the context that needed for the insightful and forward-looking discussion today. With this, now we will hear the presentation on the key global renewables outlook and the renewables power generation cost finding from IRENA that will provide an overview result from energy scenarios, socioeconomic analysis, and renewable power generation cost trend by Ricardo Gorini, our Senior Program Officer for Renewable Energy Roadmap, and Michael Renner, Program Officer Policy. Over to you, Ricardo Gorini.
Thank you very much, Adam. Pleasure to be here. Welcome, everyone. So today, I would like to start on the presentation of the Global Renewable Outlook. So we hear how important is looking at this scenario analysis and trying to understand what are the possibilities related to this energy transformation, especially in this region that has so many important resources that could bring a lot of impact economically and also energy security as well. Of course, emission reductions and local air quality benefits. So next one, please. Let me first just contextualize. So in IRENA, we have many different types of studies. This is under those 2 pillars, global and regional studies. So we have the Renewable Energy Roadmap studies. We have been working in the region in the past. 2016, we had the report, as you can see here, Renewable Energy Outlook in ASEAN. And as you also heard, we are going and we are ongoing. We are actually developing this new ASEAN Renewable Energy Outlook together with AIDS. So this is the context internally. So please, next slide. I would like to highlight that indeed renewable energy is already dominant in the world. As you can see, the generation expansion is being dominated by renewable energy in the past years. So basically, it's very important to understand that this drive is already ongoing in the world. And especially, as you can see in the graph below, this is due to cost competitiveness. So renewable energy is indeed gaining very important steps in terms of cost reduction, including comparing to coal and fossil fuels in general. And we expect that to continue. So this graph in the very middle, in the down in very middle, you see that for 2030, we still expect that to continue. So competitiveness is key and is in the central of this energy transformation. So this is a very interesting message for the region. Of course, we have COVID and all the impacts that are related to COVID in all energy carriers. But once we start to analyze what's going on in terms of the implications of COVID, it's quite interesting because it's raining sustainability awareness. So we can say that COVID is reinforcing all the drivers that will bring enhancement in this energy transformation and acceleration as well. So please, next slide. What are those drives? As you can see here, the transforming energy landscape will bring not just emission reduction, but those, as you can see here, are also very important, usually related to energy policy goals, but also broader socio-economic and sectoral as well benefits. So just to mention a few, energy security, as I said, in the region is very important. Renewable can bring that. Local renewable energy, it's very important to bring that. And the other one, Michael, my colleague, will explore as well the socioeconomic implications. So next slide, please. If you can see at the emission reduction, this is key globally level, and all the regions in the world are trying to bring increasing NDC enhancements and emissions target reductions. So we understand that globally, energy efficiency, renewable electrifications are key to develop and to drive this emission reduction. If you can see in this graph here, the contribution of renewable energy is quite important in all the sectors, not just power sector, but end-use sectors as well. So we're talking about here transport, industry, buildings in general, both direct electrification and indirect electrification, if you want to go into more, let's say, a deep decarbonization perspectives as well. So globally, this is very important, electrification with energy efficiency and renewable. Please, next slide. I think it's please, next slide. Just want to explore now, what are the numbers? What's the challenge that we are here analyzing? As you can see here, those two indicators. First one is the renewable energy share in total final energy consumption. Today's level is around 11%. If you look at the plans altogether globally, we will reach by 2050 around 25%. That's not enough. We need to go further. That's what we expect in this normative energy scenario analysis, the transforming energy scenario analysis. We need to move and to increase sixfold to reach 66% or more. If you look at the energy efficiency indicator here as well, that's an important step that's needed to increase and to enhance the measures to bring up the energy efficiency altogether. Please, next slide. What are the implications in terms of the electrification of the systems? As I said, the electrification with renewables is very important, of course, together with energy efficiency. As you can see here, this electrification share, again, must increase from 20% globally to 50% by 2050. So this is a trend that's already happening, but we need to accelerate this. And there are a lot of opportunities that that will bring, as you can see down in the slide. For instance, the electrification of the transport, the fleets, not just light vehicles, but also the other modes as well. And also in buildings, heat pumps, for instance, and super efficient appliances altogether. So that could bring the whole transformation. Just to give a few examples. And please have a look on the numbers. Here we're talking about billions. So the importance of this transformation in the industries as well is key. So there are a lot of opportunities in terms of development aspects here. Coming back to the renewable energy share, as is presented in the first part of the slide, we need to go up to 86% by 2050. So that will bring a lot of increasing needs in terms of investment in renewable energy. So please, next slide. Just to give you some numbers for the power sector, 86% by 2050 will imply globally in 6,000 or more of wind, 8,000 or more of solar, a huge increase in hydro and also bioenergy related, as you can see. So, of course, predominantly renewable energy, and those numbers will imply increasing investments year by year. So again, a lot of opportunity in terms of economic growth. Please, next slide. Of course, there are some implications of this investment in renewable in terms of grids and the power flexibility that's needed. Yet here, there are a lot of innovation opportunities in terms of improving the grids, in terms of course, storage related, not just batteries, but all sources of possibilities there, including sector coupling. So as much as we go into this connectivity and all the new, let's say, wave of innovations in different aspects, they sum all together to bring all these possibilities where the demand side is much more effective and much more engaged in this process. So this is very interesting, and there are a lot of opportunities here to transform and to benefit all the societies related to this. So please have a look again on the shares and as well on the amounts of I would say units here, not just solar and wind, but also the storage technologies that are there. Next slide, please. Not just flexibility from this, but also hydro and bioenergy must play an important, very important role, especially in the region. So globally, we expect hydro to increase, as you can see, from today's level 1.2 to more than, but around 2 by 2050, 1.8. As you can see, you know, that's very interesting because hydro must still play an important role. Of course, sustainability here is also important. We need to be aware of how to implement the project, but hydro has still an important role to play due to this cheap source of flexibility and as well all the ancillary services that could bring to the grid, and included pumped hydro. So this, not just hydro, but this is also the same case if you look at the bioenergy. Here down at the very bottom of the slide, you can see that we're talking about from 136 billion to 600 billions. So it's a huge investment there that's needed, and the region has important resources for that. So please, next slide. Now, specifically on the region, so the global context, it's important because the drivers are there. These dynamics are changing all the markets, and no region is isolated. So this is going to impact in different waves, but somehow it will going to impact all the regions. Specifically for this region, as you can see here, there is an opportunity to reduce the emissions per year by 2050, going to this renewable energy share increase, and especially increasing the investments per year around 140 billions, as you can see. So this will bring the possibility of consumption increase, let's say, a little bit lower than expected in the planned energy scenario. So this is also an important message that could bring, more efficiency for the whole economy. So please, next slide. So I think just to summarize here, those are the actions needed. Once we need to increase and to enhance the renewable energy investment, together with electrification and energy efficiency and all the investments that I've mentioned, we need to bring all together a set of actions and policies and enhancements in the regulations. Just to mention a few, of course, the end-use sector, it's very important. We need to target this effort in terms of increasing the penetration of renewable in the end-use sector. Again, the flexibility, as I said, and all the renewable energy aspects related to power is key here, especially the sector coupling solutions, that, as I mentioned. And again, markets for bioenergy. That's indeed something we should try as much as possible to enhance, because this is very important, as bioenergy has a very important role to play, especially as feedstocks, and also for energy use in different markets. So having said that, I think that's the key aspect to recognize, and also the importance of this alignment of short-term or medium-term policies with long-term policies. So all the recovery packages, all the recovery efforts that are being discussed and implemented, I think there is an important opportunity here to bring this transformation forward. So that's the key message. Please, next slide. Thank you very much. I would like to ask my colleague Michael now to explain the socioeconomics. So thank you.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Ricardo. So you have all now heard Ricardo lay out the scenarios for the energy transition that we are working on, or have been working on, in the context of the global renewables outlook. So from our side, from the side of the Knowledge Policy and Finance Center of IRENA, we have, with the help of an econometric modeling team based in the UK, examined the likely socioeconomic impacts of these pathways. And if you can actually please move to the next slide. So what the slide here does is it provides a little bit of context. It shows the various reports that we are doing to assess the socioeconomics of renewables and of the energy transition, including the global renewables outlook. But what we do here, and you can see it in a nutshell, is we have an annual assessment of jobs already in existence in renewable energy. We have a series of reports, what we call leveraging local capacities. We analyze the gender aspects of renewable energy. And of course we do, and this is the subject, of course, of today's session, we do assess the impacts of the modeling. We assess the modeling impacts of the energy transition scenarios to 2030 and to 2050. So what does the econometric modeling actually indicate as the results of these scenarios that Ricardo has laid out in his presentation? We analyze both the GDP impacts and the jobs results. And if we can please move to the next slide. So looking at GDP first, very broadly speaking, the GDP results of our ambitious transition pathway, the transforming energy scenario, are very positive, as you can see in this figure. The main drivers of what you see on this slide are investment impulses in the first place, but also consumer spending throughout the economy, so that we get a set of indirect and induced effects in various sectors of the economy. But also the changes that are obtained in terms of trade patterns, trade dependencies, and so on. So by 2050, the transforming energy scenario raises global GDP by about 2.4% over what we would expect under the less ambitious scenario. And the cumulative gain over the years to 2050 is about $98 trillion, so a very substantial sum. So in very simple terms, I think we can say that the more ambitious types of climate and energy action that we undertake, the better we end up in terms of the economy and the jobs results. Next slide, please. So going from the global level to the regional level, you can see that most of the world's regions see their GDP rise under the transforming energy scenario as well. The divergences that we see in terms of how well regions are doing principally relate to the differences in national energy roadmaps, levels of policy ambition. But of course, also you need to look at the underlying macroeconomic structures that are in place. And again, including the trade patterns, the trade dependencies among different regions and among different countries within them. So for Southeast Asia, the regional GDP looks quite good in comparison with other regions, growing by about 2.9% more under the more ambitious scenario than the less ambitious one. And in cumulative terms, the region will add about $5.6 trillion more to GDP than they would under a business as usual approach. Next slide, please. So then turning from GDP to employment results. So first looking at the global level again. We expect that the global energy sector will employ almost 100 million people by 2050, which is up from about 58 million in 2017. The composition of the jobs within the energy industry will also shift away from fossil fuels and toward a set of energy transition related fields. So we have for renewable energy, for example, we expect a total of 42 million jobs in 2050, 21 million in energy efficiency, and about 15 million in the fields of power grids and energy flexibility. Next slide, please. Now, looking again, coming down from the global level to the regional level, all regions of the world are expected to enjoy employment gains that outweigh the losses in fossil fuels quite substantially. So if you look at the left-hand side of the slide, this compares results under the two scenarios with Southeast Asia being highlighted. On the right-hand side, there's actually a little bit more detail for Southeast Asia. So total energy sector jobs in the region are expected to reach about 10.5 million under the ambitious scenario, which would be a net increase of almost 5 million over the less ambitious scenario. And again, breaking it down, looking at renewable energy, jobs there would reach 6.7 million, most of them in bioenergy, followed by solar PV. Jobs in energy efficiency would increase very slightly from about 600,000 to 700,000. And again, there are some losses in fossil fuels, but they would be outweighed by these gains in renewables. Next slide, please. So we come up in the Global Renewables Outlook report with a number of sort of principles and key objectives to ensure that we have a successful energy transition. And this slide really just summarizes a few of these findings that we have in the report. So very clearly, I think this is beyond any doubt, we need to raise ambition, whether that be through the NDCs or any other measures. We need to have a very strong set of public interventions, so launching public investment plans, providing strategic guidance for the energy transition. And I think this has really, the importance of doing so has been really further heightened by the impacts of the COVID-19 crisis. I mean, I think there's just no doubt now that we cannot leave this alone to market dynamics. We need to have a very strong set of public policies in place. The next point, investment, we need to safeguard the existing renewable energy projects, and we need to also ensure that there is strong future expansion of renewables with the support of stable and ambitious policy frameworks. Part of that would be trying to extend feasible the localization of industries by diversifying supply chains and by strengthening local capacities. Part of that, of course, is again, I've talked about the jobs results of our findings. So the employment aspect is really quite important. So we need to ensure that we support the workforce expansion in energy transition related fields through labor market policies and other measures. Among these other measures is developing strong education and training measures to minimize any skills gaps that may emerge as we go through the energy transition process. And the last point is just to make sure that, we often talk, of course, about what we call the modern dimensions of the energy sector, but we should not forget that there is a very, very important aspect with regard to ensuring greater energy access, so that we keep that very, very close in mind when we design and implement policies. So next and last slide, please. So looking at the policy side of things, it's quite clear that we need a very comprehensive package of policies. And let me just highlight a few aspects of that. It's quite clear we need very ambitious deployment policies, whether that be auctions, feed-in tariffs, mandates, targets of various kinds. And those need to be accompanied by a set of measures that facilitate the integration of renewable energy into power grids and into various end-use sectors. But beyond this, and let me focus on that for the remainder of my time. Beyond these, we need a set of enabling policies that can help us create the socioeconomic underpinnings of the transition. And included here is, in the first place, we often call attention to the industrial policies that are needed to leverage and enhance domestic capabilities in different countries and to create viable domestic supply chains. Now, this might involve economic incubators, industry clusters, in some cases, local content rules. We need to, I mentioned this just before, education and skills policies. So this includes efforts to coordinate the needs of the renewable energy industry with the training offerings by the educational sector. So special attention in this context is needed to detect opportunities for reorienting the skills and the expertise of workers from the fossil fuel sector towards the clean energy sector to see what is basically, where's the common ground, where the common skills and occupational patterns that can be put to good use for the energy transition. We need to have a set of labor market policies and social protection measures in the interim. So again, to avoid mismatches between skills demand and supply. We need to make sure that we provide adequate employment services. To some extent, it may be necessary to facilitate labor mobility. So there's a whole set of labor market policies that are really playing a very important role. Fiscal and financial policies, of course, are very important to mobilize revenues to promote the energy transition. And again, I had referred at the beginning of this slide the importance of public investment strategies. So you can't have an investment strategy if you don't have the revenues. So we need to really make sure that both ends of the financial picture are taken care of. But let me end with the following thought. I think it's really important to emphasize that this is not a matter of sort of picking from one, among one or the other of these kinds of policies. I think what's important is to make sure that we understand how these policy fields interact, how they reinforce and support each other. So ultimately, the success of one policy measure does ride very much on the progress made in the others. And as such, let me use the closing remark here to say that we need a very coherent and a very ambitious overall policy package. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, gentlemen. So, as highlighted by Ricardo and Michael, that the region could meet almost 41% of its energy need from the renewables, and the energy transformation will result also in the socioeconomic effects in terms of job creation and GDP gains. So now we would like to invite Dr. Tarinya Supasa to deliver her presentation on the ASEAN Renewables Outlook. Dr. Tarinya Supasa, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Adam. So it's my pleasure to present our upcomings, the 6th ASEAN Energy Outlook today in the SIEW IRENA sections. So next slide, please. So this outlook has been developed to ensure the strong collaboration with the ASEAN member states focal point. So start the initial state of the data collections, scenario discussion, assumption, and the result consultation with the 10 countries. And second, to ensure the harmonizations of the modeling work. So the model has been developed like 10+1 model. So one regional model which can be disaggregated into 10 individual national model. So in one model, it can elaborate or it can simulation for individual result and also for the regional result. And then lastly, validation. So this outlook has been consolidates most updated energy efficiency, renewable energy, and power development plan, and also NDC through the consultation process with the 10 ASEAN member states process, and also including the process of how we interpret those targets into the work. Next, please. And yeah, this outlook is combined with 4 scenarios. The first one is baseline, which is assume these more efforts on the energy efficiency, renewable energy, but still include the most updated power development plan into the modeling work. So from the baseline, assume the efforts on energy efficiency and renewable energy, similar to the historical practice. The second scenario is we call the AMS target scenario, or the ASEAN member state target scenario, which is incorporate or these official update energy efficiency, renewable energy from the 10 countries, and also including the Power Development Plan and NDC. And the third one is the regional target scenario, or called the APAEC target scenario. So this scenario is assumed scaling up or the effort from energy efficiency and renewable energy, and also include the accelerate development of renewable energy capacity in power sector. And the last scenario is we call SDG 7. So this scenario is to ensure that ASEAN's practice in the first, second, and third scenario is in line with the global commitment, and to analyze the gap and how to fulfill the gap. Next, please. So there are 4 components that can be found in our upcoming 6 ASEAN Energy Outlook. The first one, the breakout, is include how this outlook can support the creation pathway for achieving the regional target and aspiration, and the role of energy corporations under the ASEAN Plan of Energy collaboration or APAEC to address or the challenge, including energy security, affordability, accessibility, and sustainability. And this outlook is also incorporate the impact of COVID-19 to the GDP recession in the modeling work. And their second component, which is the main part of this outlook, is showing the philosophy behind the outlook scenario, and also the national target and regional target and policy is also present in this part. And the result is showing in energy landscape, emission, and also socio-economics impacts, including investment, externalities, and also the job creation per each scenario. And the third component is we call the thematic energy insight, which is extend the idea from the second part or the main scenario of the outlook, because there we aware that the technology is changing rapidly, and also there's still some interesting highlight topic which still under discussion and really play significant role to support ASEAN to achieve the APAEC target and also for the future ASEAN development. So the 5 selected highlight topic here is including the ASEAN power grid, the role of fossil fuel in future, efficient air conditioning in building sector, greener transport, which is highlight in biofuel and the electric vehicle, and lastly, for the clean cooking. And the last combination is we are talking about the recommendation and implication, including the policy recommendation and also institutional and the model improvement in future. Next slide, please. So for the energy transition in the consumption side in ASEAN, so based on the baseline scenario, if 10 countries keep doing what they did in historical path with the small effort in the policy intervention, so it's showing that fossil fuel will still play a significant role in the consumption in ASEAN. And so the largest share is go to oil consumption, following by electricity and natural gas. Meanwhile, the renewable energy share still also show the smaller fraction. So from 10% in 2017, we reduced to 8% and 5% in 2040. Next slide, please. If or the energy efficiency renewable energy target NDC will fully achieve by 10 countries, so we could see that the demand, the energy demand will be reduced around 23% comparing to baseline. And the smaller fractions of fossil fuel is mean ASEAN will rely lower in fossil fuel, especially for oil. And the larger fractions of renewable energy will increase in next 5 years from 8% in baseline to 14%. and that will reach 17% in 2040 within this scenario. And the biggest compound annual growth rate can be seen in the renewable energy, following by the electricity. Next slide, please. This slide is showing the result in the regional target scenario or the APAEC target scenario. So we assume if our energy efficiency and renewable energy measures in the ASEAN is scaling up, the energy saving can be achieved further comparing to the ASEAN target scenario around 13%. And lower fractions of fossil fuel can be further achieved from 59 to 57. And also the higher RE share can be observed from 14% to 16% in the next 5 years, and it increased to 22% in 2040. So this achievement can come from like the more stringent energy efficiency measure and also support from the regional collaboration. For example, best practice, energy labeling, capacity building, training, try to push more efforts in energy saving. And meanwhile, so scaling up the renewable energy adoptions efforts, for example, in biofuel deployment and also for the solar rooftop in building sector. Next slide, please. This transition can be highlighted in the transportation sector. So on your left-hand side, it can be seen the biofuel growth rate comparing in each scenario. So the trend can reflect like the ASEAN member state has some strong commitment to the biofuel policy. This due to the high quality of biofuel availability in the regions. However, this biofuel growth has to need the support from some policy intervention. For example, accelerate the biofuel power vehicle or the engine modification policy, phase out the 100% diesel and gasoline selling in the market, and promote more like the branding fossil fuel selling in the market, and more research on the regional biomass and biofuel potential. So for example, currently ACE have the collaboration with NSTDA Thailand, doing some research in the biofuel study. And the last one is the technology assessment. So this not only the technology for the vehicle itself, but also technology for the biofuel production. For example, the second generation of the biofuel. And on your right hand side, it's showing the potential growth rate of the EV or electric vehicle. According to the consultation process, so we found that there's a lot of ASEAN member states under consideration for the electric vehicle. So there's high potential for the rapid growth rate for electric vehicle. Several ASEAN member states had set the target directly and indirectly on their electric, shifting away from the fossil fuel combustions to the electric vehicle. And also is also the possibility to hold like for the electric vehicle itself will be growth rapidly or quicker than any scenario stated in this AO6. And also the EV growth will be expected to grow faster, and also in parallel have to ensure that those electricity demand can be met by the renewable energy power. Next slide, please. And this showing the decarbonization transition in power sector. So in long term, the more like stringent energy efficiency practice can lower the needs of installing more power plant capacity demand in ASEAN. And comparing to the ATS or the national target scenario in 2025, so that's showing around 33% of the capacity will be renewable energy. However, if ASEAN would like to achieve the regional target, so that's the urgent or that require more renewable energy in the power system to be injected, increased to 48% of RE. So that will lead to the notable increase in solar and some partially from wind. And this scaling up effort from solar and wind is come from the evaluate from the resource assessment tools, which is developed together with our the other project in ACE, which is the AIMS-3 or ASEAN Interconnection Master Plan Development Project. Next slide, please. I think this is end of my presentation as mentioned by our director. So for the full report of the 6th ASEAN Energy Outlook can be accessed and download after our launching in the 38 AMEM. And in this regards, I also would like to thank you, GIZ, for support this development of the 6th ASEAN Energy Outlook project. Thank you very much. Back to you, Adam.
Thank you very much, Dr. Tarinya, for the very insightful presentation. We really look forward for the release of ASEAN Energy Outlook 6 and believe that this will give a lot better perspective for all the stakeholders in ASEAN. So I would like to give the floor next to Ambassador Ken to deliver his presentation. Over to you, Ambassador Ken.
Thank you very much, Adam. It's a pleasure to be here today. So leaders from across the world will travel to Glasgow in November next year to attend the COP26 summit on climate change. For the UK, delivering a successful COP26 summit is a top priority for us in the year ahead. We want COP26 to mark a clear step forward in global efforts to drive down emissions and tackle the impact of climate change. We're already working hard to engage governments, businesses, and societies across the world to deliver strong climate action between now and November next year. The challenge is clear. Without urgent action, the world is not on track to meet 1.5 or even 2 degrees Celsius overall increase in global temperatures. And if we do fail in that regard, the consequences for the world will be catastrophic. The International Energy Agency has assessed that to meet the goals of the Paris Agreement, the global transition to clean power needs to progress at least 4 times faster than it is progressing today. That's why the energy transition is one of our 5 key campaigns as COP26 presidency and a key focus of our work, including in the Asian region. Next slide, please. So the Energy Transition Campaign under our COP26 presidency aims to accelerate the transition to a clean energy future by encouraging countries, businesses, and communities to embrace the economic and social benefits of cheaper renewable energy. As COP26 president, in partnership with Italy, we are working with other countries to double the global investment in clean power to support a clean and fair transition away from coal, to increase innovation in clean energy technologies, tackle energy efficiency, and increase affordable access to electricity for 840 million more people. The campaign is particularly relevant in the Asia region, given Asia's role as the main driver of the global economy and the significant pipeline of fossil fuel and particularly coal projects in this region. Next slide, please. The global transition to clean energy is clearly the right thing to do in terms of combating climate change and reducing the health and environmental impacts of using fossil fuels. But at least as importantly, it also makes very clear economic sense. Our experience in the UK shows that we did not have to choose between emissions reductions and GDP growth. The UK economy has grown by 75% since 1990, at the same time as cutting our emissions by 43%. In Southeast Asia, the economic case for accelerating the energy transition is also clear. The cost of renewable energy and storage has dramatically fallen over the last few years, and across the region, renewable energy is increasingly cost competitive with coal. In fact, solar and wind are already cheaper than coal power in most countries, including every single ASEAN country, and those costs will continue to fall. According to recent analysis by IRENA, investing in a shift to renewables could add 4.4% to to the baseline growth of economies in this region and could grow jobs by up to 50%. If you compare that to fossil fuels, a recent study by McKinsey shows that 75 jobs are created for every $10 million spent on renewables, compared to just 27 jobs in fossil fuels. Next slide, please. New technologies are only accelerating this trend, meaning that fossil fuels, and in particular coal power plants, will have a much shorter period of financial viability. Across the world, including in this region, countries are cancelling coal projects given the rapidly falling cost of renewables. We very much welcome the announcement by the Philippines this week that it is placing a moratorium on all new coal projects. That follows decisions by countries such as Vietnam and Bangladesh to review coal projects already in the pipeline. We expect these announcements to continue with increasing regularity in the months ahead, because the economic arguments are clear. Coal is a doomed industry. Investors are increasingly turning away from these projects, only too aware that within a few years it will be cheaper to build new renewable energy plants than to run existing coal plants. Few sensible investors welcome the risk of being saddled with stranded assets for years to come. As the first major economy to set a net zero target, the UK has seen and seized this opportunity. We have committed to ending use of coal power by 2024, which is quite significant for a country that led the Industrial Revolution based on use of coal. Our energy generated from coal was down to 2.2% in 2019 from 40% just 7 years earlier. Between April and June 2020, the UK went 67 days without using any coal power whatsoever. So we can truly say from our experience that the energy transition is both attainable and desirable. We very much welcome the progress which is being made also in Asia. Next slide, please. So as we look forward to COP26, the UK's energy transition campaign is bringing countries, development banks, investors, industry and civil society together to ensure that every country can access the investment and assistance to more rapidly scale up renewable energy, and to ensure that globally we can phase out the use of coal. But we know that many countries face barriers in expanding their renewable energy capacity. Such barriers include the relatively high capital costs at the start of projects, difficulty in accessing finance, and lack of support with the technical aspects of the transition to clean power. That's why we have launched the COP26 Energy Transition Council, chaired by our COP26 President Alok Sharma, alongside Damilola Ogubunyi, the UN Secretary General Special Representative for Sustainable Energy. The Council will harness multilateral convening power and senior sector expertise to more rapidly find solutions to drive forward a transition to clean energy in other countries. In my role, I very much hope that the creation of the Energy Transition Council will assist ASEAN countries' energy transition in the years ahead. Next slide, please. Quite apart from our COP26 role, the UK already has a strong record of supporting low carbon growth in Asia. Our £15 million low carbon energy programme is supporting green finance and energy efficiency transitions in Thailand, Malaysia, Vietnam, Indonesia, Myanmar and the Philippines. In Indonesia, our £13 million Mentari UK-Indonesia Low Carbon Energy Partnership is supporting Indonesia to become a renewable energy superpower by harnessing its abundant solar, wind and other clean technology potential to drive sustainable economic growth. Our UK Pact programme has also been delivering in Asia since 2018, including support to the Malaysian government to enhance its... there was a bit of interference on the line, including support to the Malaysian government to enhance its climate governance architecture. UK Pact's work is expanding in the region with the Green Recovery Challenge Fund, which will disperse £12 million over 2 years on projects to help countries accelerate their low carbon transition. I'm also proud to share that last month, the ASEAN Secretariat and its member states endorsed the ASEAN-UK Cooperation Framework on COP26. This will allow even greater partnership between the UK and ASEAN on climate change in the lead up to COP26 in the areas of highest priority to this region, including the energy transition. Final slide, please. So in closing, the arguments for a clean... Sorry, there's a problem on my line. In conclusion, the arguments for a clean energy transition are clear. By ending the use of polluting coal power and speeding up the move to renewables, we can both reduce emissions and support a clean, green, and resilient economic recovery that will deliver growth and jobs for countries across Asia at a crucial moment. There is quite simply no time to waste. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ken, for the presentation. I mean, we believe, overall, it is very encouraging information that the transition towards clean energy is now a global trend, and the cost of it also getting more and more competitive, as well as all of the socioeconomic benefits that it brings. Okay, distinguished participants, we will now proceed to our last sessions when we have two panel sessions focusing the first on the country perspective and the second, the regional level perspective for energy transformation in ASEAN. And before that, I would like to inform all of the participants that you may give question in the virtual platform towards all the information that we are going to bring within this panel discussion. With that, I would like to hand over the floor to Mr. Winston Cho, the Deputy Chief of Party from USAID, who will be moderating the first session on the country level perspective for the energy transformation in ASEAN. Over to you, Mr. Cho.
Okay, thank you, Adam. I'd like to first welcome our audience to our first panel on country level perspectives for energy transformation in ASEAN, and remind our audience again, as Adam mentioned, that you can ask questions of the panelists, which I will select from, in the chat box right off screen for this panel. Make sure you click questions in the chat box to make sure I can see it. Now, to start with introductions, again, I'm Winston Chow. I work for Apt Associates. We're a private international development company headquartered in Maryland, USA. We have 4 guests on our panel today who will be sharing their thoughts on key technologies and global trends for energy transformation. First, we're here joined by Dr. Sanjayan Balatam, CEO of the Sustainable Energy Development Authority of Malaysia. He is a professional engineer and has more than 30 years of experience in the industry, international organizations, and academia and research institutes. We're also joined by Malag San Jose Ballesteros, Regional Director for East, Southeast Asia, and Oceania for C40 Cities. Malag has more than 20 years of experience working on environmental governance and policy, natural resources management and sustainable development, and includes her work for the United States Agency for International Development. From the private sector, we have Matt Friedman, Chief Digital Officer of SEMCorp. He has over 2 decades experience in the technology industry. Prior to joining SEMCorp, he spent 16 years at IBM, where he was responsible for leading a team of over 500 people and delivering more than $5 billion in annual revenue. Big program. Finally, we're joined by Bernard Sala, Chief Technical Officer of EDF Group. He's also Senior Executive Vice President of EDF Group and President of EDF Research and Development, managing over 2,000 researchers, covering all the group's activities, including upstream in the field of generation and downstream in fields of transport and distribution grids, energy management and customer relationship and management. We're very lucky to have all our folks on the panel today. So I'd like to join the audience in thanking the 4 of you for giving us your time today. Am I still on? Okay. So Dr. Velatan, I'd like to start with your take on Malaysia. Malaysia is a good mix of energy resources like oil, natural gas, coal, renewable energies, such as biomass, solar, and hydro. But there's clearly a lot more potential for clean energy transition. How does Malaysia see this COVID pandemic in 2020 affecting Malaysia's energy transition effort?
Can you all hear me now?
Yes.
All right, very good. Thanks for the introduction. Very good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, to all participants and of course, my fellow panelists today. I hope all of you are doing well and continue to do well in these circumstances. These are, of course, unprecedented moments in our recent history. This IRENA roundtable itself is unprecedented, I believe. But anyway, allow me to take this opportunity to thank IRENA for inviting the Sustainable Energy Development Authority of Malaysia to be part of this discussion. And I also like to congratulate the ASEAN Center for Energy for coming up with the ASEAN Energy Outlook, the 6th. Very good. So allow me to address the question that you've asked regarding the energy transition and the COVID impact this year. I think we can't argue that every country, the pandemic has and is drastically disturbing everyday life. If we were to take one good thing out of this, then during the lockdowns, we actually saw environment which had a positive impact because of the improvement of air quality. But this is all going to go back when industries which actually had a strain on the business during the COVID. As one of the things from that is it exposed us to the vulnerability to our economies, and that Malaysia was no exception to that. Just to give you an example, the electricity consumption during this lockdown dipped more than 30% from its normal level in Malaysia. So a lot of emphasis was given in place to roll out a series of economic stimulus packages to help various population and sectors. To this effect, to share with you what the Malaysian government did to the economic stimulus packages, where renewable energy was part of it, they consisted of 1,400 megawatts of solar that was awarded as a quota, we call it a quota, that was released during this period to energize the renewable energy market. And we do it through a reverse bidding process. 1,000 megawatt was released. And in September this year, we've closed that. We restructured and redesigned the way we put the business plan together and sized this large-scale solar system. So more participation from the SMEs could be part of this bidding. And it closed in September. The response has been overwhelming. And now I think they are in the midst of evaluating it and getting it released. Apart from that, the on solar, we also emphasize net energy metering or rooftops, where domestic, residential can continue with this to use their own energy in terms for their usage of homes. And the excess is actually sold out to the grid. And this was another incentives given to enhance the uptake of smaller solar systems in Malaysia. This is coupled with what we call the non-variable RE. The non-variable RE in Malaysia focuses on, as previous speakers has spoken in ASEAN, biomass, biogas, and hydro. Here we have in Malaysia a feed-in tariff system. And during the same period, in the mid of April, we actually allocated quota for the non-variable RE under this program to encourage the uptake of biomass, biogas, and hydro. So with this introduction of what we were doing this year, I think this effort resonates with what IRENA has published in their Global Renewable Outlook sometimes in April this year, where in principle it's saying accelerating renewables and making energy transition an integral part of the wider recovery. I think we can actually look forward to an economic prosperity that we want to progress against the social development and balancing it with the environmental requirements. So in Malaysia, we intend to continue the trajectory that we have set for ourselves. We have set a target up to 2025 and the shorter term, and we hope we will reach those targets that we have set ourselves by 2025, coupled with what we have heard from the earlier speaker, our commitment to the ASEAN Plan of Action for Energy Cooperation, which is going to be launched in November, phase 2, which is basically also ensuring there is a regional commitment in terms of a collective energy future. So in conclusion, as an introduction, I think this crisis of COVID-19 has really reshaped attitudes. And the new realities, I think, call for a change or a different policy approach that will require broader public rethink on the investments of the low carbon systems that would significantly pay off if we compare it to health and environmental issues. Mr. Moderator, I'll stop here for the time being. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Balotam. Very interesting thoughts. Ms. Ballesteros, cities in Asia are growing at an unprecedented rate, although under COVID, that may be changing. And of course, that has implications towards energy issues throughout the region. What are some of the key challenges faced by cities and countries in ASEAN on energy transformation currently? And how can these challenges be addressed?
Hello, yes, good afternoon, everyone. And again, thank you for the opportunity to join this panel. So C40 as a city network composed of around 97 of the major cities around the globe. Our focus really is working with cities and climate change. And I guess going back to the conversations and what was shared earlier, I would like to emphasize, I think one of the key challenge is really across ASEAN and a number of cities is really looking at the holistic systemic approach, and that means a whole of government approach. I think it was clarified that there needs to be a suite and a comprehensive package of policies. So from a C40 perspective, working with cities, there's still a number of barriers that's being identified, one of which is, of course, alignment with regulatory frameworks with national or state governments. And then the focus, again, is on while there's a drive and there are policy announcements when you talk about moving away from coal and really moving towards renewable energy, it struck me that in the global outlook, it mentioned that end user sectors comprise about 2/3 when you really want to address the whole energy transformation. And when you talk about those sectors, very much a part of that is really the cities, which contributes about 70 to 80% in terms of global emissions, especially the cities that we work with, including Jakarta, Bangkok, Singapore, the big cities of the world. So I think one of the key things is really looking at constraining energy demand and how enabling environment is being provided on that. In the course of really understanding what it means for the Paris Agreement at the local level within countries and cities, we dig deeper in terms of city contributions towards the goal or the ambition of Paris to constrain temperature rise to 1.5 degrees. And we've worked with members in terms of their climate action planning. There are four big opportunities that we see. Of course, one is decarbonizing the grid, which includes a centralized renewable system. But also what's emerging in our work with cities is the whole concept or the whole idea of distributed renewables, which I think finds resonance now with COVID, more importantly in terms of energy and supply security. The other thing I think that has been pointed out in the earlier conversations and presentations is the electrification or the next generation mobility that we're looking at. So the four big opportunities would be decarbonizing the grid. It's looking at buildings energy efficiency. It's looking at transport or sustainable transport, and then of course waste management. Within the building space, it's looking at new building standards, which we are working on with quite a number of cities. Jakarta, I know, is looking at a green building code. That would be the same for Quezon City in the Philippines, the biggest city in terms of population and geographical scope. We are also working with cities, of course, in the field of mobility. Walking and cycling as the lowest almost zero carbon form of transport has emerged within the COVID conversation. And obviously, if you look at constraining the energy demand in terms of transport, mass transit would still play a very key role. And electrified mass transit, whether it's the BRT in Jakarta, which is the longest, I think, in terms of mileage worldwide, comprising almost like 10,000 buses that would be, the aim would be shifted to electric vehicles, other than, of course, the private vehicle transition that we're talking about. So I think the challenge there is aligning the national systemic move, whether it's centralized renewables or distributed renewables, and some of those initiatives that really are happening on the ground. And in fact, maybe moving faster with the agility and the nimbleness that some cities are able to practice, and actually within their power, or even pushing the boundaries in terms of being able to deliver on this. I would just like to touch on quickly, because last night C40 just came out with our findings and our press release. I think financing would be very key, and where investments are going. And when we looked at the sweep of stimulus packages coming up, whether it's at national government, central banks, international financing institutions, the stimulus packages are coming up to 12 billion to 15 billion. But if you dig deeper in terms of the policy announcement and how that translates into actual portfolios and projects, it seems like only 3 to 5% of that stimulus packages would find its way in terms of sustainable investment, which is worrisome. And so I think one of the key things to call on in terms of the various financing institutions, it's great to hear the example from Dr. Sanjayan in terms of Malaysia and renewable energy and the link there in terms of the stimulus package. But I think we have yet to see that across all the ASEAN countries, and to what extent, of course, that also looks into the key sectors that I've mentioned earlier. And so I think a coherence there and a real investment on green recovery would be the way forward in terms of really addressing the challenges that are faced by countries and cities. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, well, to get more specific about cities, you have great experience there, and you mentioned sustainable transportation. How do you think the progress of electric vehicles will develop post-COVID throughout the region? You mentioned financing. Is there an important crossover there?
Well, in terms of cities, our conversation is that the cities remain committed to that. In fact, it's even amplified. While cities were already looking at electrification of buses, in general fleets, or even commercial freights, it was already in their climate action plans or initiatives before. But I think within the pandemic situation, that's even more amplified because of its direct link in terms of improving air quality. Electric vehicles, even without a change, for example, in the grid, the findings that we've had in our work, for example, in an earlier research with the Bloomberg NEF, is that there would be a massive reduction in terms of emissions, and that would redound both carbon emissions as well as the PM or the air quality levels in terms of improvement of air quality. So for example, our work in Jakarta on the initial e-bus trials, the background of that and the real anchor of that is improving air quality. So that was the driver in terms of shifting from diesel buses directly to electric buses. So I think there would still be that. I have not seen that countries have move away from those commitments. I think Indonesia, mentioned before, announced that they would still, for example, invest on EV battery plants by 2023. Singapore remains, I think, with its target of phasing out internal combustion engines by 2040. In Vietnam, VinFast, the domestic car manufacturer, still plans to launch electric cars in 2021. So I think more importantly, that's amplified right now. So the scope and the opportunity and that trend in terms of electric vehicles would continue. I think one of the things that we are trying to understand a bit more coming from East Asia, and I think Singapore earlier mentioned, is the hydrogen technology as well, which we're seeing in Australia, in New Zealand, in East Asian countries, cities we are working with, Tokyo, Seoul, in Japan and South Korea, including Yokohama and the other cities there. So I think that would still continue, and in fact there would be the projection is still cities as well as just generally there would be more investment in terms of EVs.
Okay, very good. Ms. Ballesteros, thank you. The next question is for Mr. Friedman. Given your experience as Chief Digital Officer, you likely have a unique perspective with regards to the technological landscape. So 2020 is a year where we are forced to move towards the digital environment. How do you see this digitalization affecting the energy transition effort of countries, especially in Singapore?
Thanks for the question, Winston. And Sembcorp, we're delighted to continue our sponsorship of SIEW. For starters, COVID-19 has definitely impacted the global economy, as we've talked about. Energy demand declined about 4% first quarter of this year, as did construction of renewable energy projects. And it's difficult to say how long it'll last, but there are also opportunities as electrification and decarbonization will continue to fuel long-term growth in Singapore and across the ASEAN region. Interestingly, digital technology adoption is actually accelerating as a byproduct of COVID-19. We see things like Zoom and video conferencing and how this event actually is being handled, buying everything we need online, huge consumption of Netflix and the likes of streaming. So we see that in our work lives and our personal lives, but we also see digital technology accelerating the energy transition itself. From automated remote operations of wind, solar, and battery storage to using machine learning and artificial intelligence to improve energy output and reduce operations and maintenance costs through better energy forecasting and predictive maintenance, to using drones and artificial intelligence for remote inspections and robotic process automation of manual and operational tasks, all of which have been facilitated by dramatically faster network connectivity and inexpensive computational horsepower from the cloud. Yeah, at Sembcorp, we've been digitalizing for the past few years, which has helped provide additional stability during this COVID storm. We continue to invest in digitalization as well as R&D, and I'll share a few examples that I think bring the benefits and opportunities to life in Singapore, but across the region. Partnerships with the EMA, as mentioned earlier, we have a $20 million partnership with the Energy Market Authority here to encourage the commercialization of energy research into solutions that address Singapore's energy needs, whether that's automated pipeline monitoring in Jurong Island, to the development of an absorption chiller system that reduces carbon output, and a virtual power plants that will help with the balancing that's certainly going to be needed in the future with the increase of EVs and electrification. Improving renewable energy production and reduce operations and maintenance costs via self-built machine learning capabilities to detect yaw misalignment, energy production forecasting, predictive asset management for over 60 components of wind turbines across multiple makes and models of turbines. And to do this all, we built a data lake, hundreds of thousands of sensors, feeding data in that in near real time, which is where the cloud piece really enables the continued reduction of costs and improved operations. We, as others, have been implementing process automation, whether that's in back office functions or in the operation side of things. And we've moved half of our applications and workloads to the cloud in a secure way, which enables the continuous operations during uncertain times like these. We've, as recently announced, deployed a software platform to help accelerate renewable energy certificates and adoption, helping many of the large Renewable 100 companies in the world to reduce their carbon emissions. And we've recently announced a new partnership in the space with Singapore Power, in fact, on the second day of this event. And as mentioned earlier, we continue to innovate in areas such as floating solar voltaic systems, agrivoltaic systems, and alternative fuels such as hydrogen, which represents a significant opportunity in this region. So whilst the cloud of COVID remains, there's fueling uncertainty in ASEAN and the world, we're optimistic that the investments that have been made by companies like ours and countries and companies across the region, as well as those in the making in digitalization and advanced engineering, are going to help maintain the momentum required for a successful and sustainable energy transition in Singapore and across the ASEAN region. Thanks, Winston.
Okay, thank you. And thank you, panel. I'd like to move over to our audience questions now. Unfortunately, we only have time for one or two. So our first question here comes from KL Yip what are the biggest challenges for global and ASEAN's push for the most optimistic growth in renewable energy? We're talking about really aggressive. Ken O'Flaherty mentioned costs at the beginning of project and technological barriers. Do you think you could speak a little more specifically to these kinds of challenges in your experience, perhaps in different locales? Panel?
Can I just start the conversation? Can you hear me, Vincent?
Thank you, Dr. Oldham.
Yeah, all right. I mean, cost is going to be a critical part of this, yeah. I think the trilemma is always between affordability from a point of view of the disposable income in each country and how the tariffs are going to be priced. And that is a very important aspect. And when we talk about RE, at least from an ASEAN point of view or Malaysian point of view, it is still considered a very nascent industry. We have to make sure the ramp up of RE has to commensurate the local supply chain, the future readiness in capacity and capabilities, plus the infrastructure, the flexibility. I think IRENA touched this, the flexibility of the infrastructure to allow more penetration of variable RE. And variable RE is a very big source of energy, at least for Malaysia in the equatorial belt. Solar is leading the RE drive. So putting solar into the system and talking about batteries and storage in whatever form has the implications of how we are going to finance this and how it's going to be sustainable on the longer term. Just to start off the conversation, I'll allow the other panelists to add on, yeah.
Maybe just adding to that from a city's perspective, Winston, I think, and we have not really fully expounded on that, is really how, working within a public policy space in that sense with cities, one of the things that we're really looking at is the whole conversation on how you bring in the private sector and that partnership. What makes sense from the private sector? And a lot of our conversation, for example, centers on scale. When you talk about renewable and when you talk about distributed renewables, for example, if you're looking at a city and then just the demand is not worth, for example, the investment, but a lot of the cities are now also discussing, for example, aggregating demand, which you've seen in Australia, for example, in Melbourne, wherein they were able to, and it's in the second phase of the Melbourne Renewable Energy Project. And I know quite a number of cities within the countries in ASEAN may be looking at that in terms of aggregating demand to be able to provide the scale that would be conducive in terms of investment and bringing in private sector money or other forms of investment. On the technology side, I think we have to also recognize that we're at that stage in the history wherein, even 10 years ago, you would think about solar and you would see the caricatures of what, a solar PV deployment, but now you see it in residential spaces, in municipal buildings, in healthcare centers. So I think we have to be, to pay attention as to how technology is moving as fast and where the opportunities are to leapfrog. We were just discussing electric vehicles, but now there's a whole conversation on hydrogen, for example, which we really need to understand to what extent the pace would develop. And I think that's where the challenge for ASEAN would be in terms of being able to leapfrog. Now it's almost common knowledge from diesel buses. A lot of cities or a lot of partners are not looking at CNG anymore, but jumping straight to electric. So I think that could very well happen in quite a lot of when we talk about the technological space.
Okay, thank you. Would any of the remaining panel like to join in on this question? No? Okay. Well, I'm sorry, but that's all the time we have for questions today. So I want to join the audience in thanking our panel for their valuable time and insights. And let's also thank everybody for joining our audience. Let's please keep in touch and be safe. On to our next panel. Back over to you, Adam. Thank you.
Okay, distinguished panelists and Winston, thank you very much for the lively panel discussion. So we believe the regional perspective panel will be as interesting So with that, I would like to invite Rizky Fauzianto, the team leader for the GIZ ASEAN German Energy Program, to lead the panel session. Over to you, Ms. Fauzianto.
All right, can you hear me, Adam?
Yes, very loud and clear.
All right, okay, thank you, Adam. And distinguished Mr. Gillen, Pak Nuki, Jonathan, Pak Sanjay, speakers and panelists and all participants here, good afternoon. My name is Rizky Fauzianto. I'm the team leader on ASEAN German Energy Program under GIZ. Very happy to have a chance to lead this discussion on panel 2 regarding the regional level perspective for energy transformation in ASEAN. For the next around maybe 30 minutes, I would like to invite you to enjoy the discussion together with me. I also would like to say thank you to IRENA for inviting me here, and I hope despite the pandemic that happens everywhere around the globe, all of us here are safe and we could have a fruitful and interesting panel discussions. Without further ado, I would like to introduce 4 panelists that are already present here. I'm happy to say that these 4 panelists are experts on energy in the regions. They are coming from the government institutions and also independent international organizations. Allow me to introduce them. The first panelist is Ms. Aisma Fitina. Aisma Fitina is a special advisor within the Global Cooperation Divisions of the Danish Energy Agency. She has been leading large-scale RE integrations and power system long-term scenario modeling projects in Scandinavia, UK, Mexico, Africa, and some ASEAN countries like Vietnam and Indonesia. She is also an author and a contributor to a number of publications under IEA, and one of the interesting publications related to ASEAN, which is the first edition of Vietnam Energy Outlook 2017. Ms. Aisma, I'm very happy to have you here. The second panelist is Tom Moody. Tom is UK Regional Director, Southeast Asia for Climate and Energy. He oversees the UK government's climate change and low carbon energy strategy in the ASEAN region. He also managed the mobilization of regional policy and development programming, which includes directing the UK's network of climate change across Southeast Asia. Previously, he spent nearly 4 years in South Africa, overseeing £50 million portfolio of Prosperity Fund program in South Africa region. Tom, also thank you for allowing your time to be here. The third panelist is David Wogan. David is the Assistant Vice President, a Senior Visiting Researcher at Asia Pacific Energy Research Center, or APEC. He coordinates the APEC Energy Outlook, which provides supply and demand projections for the 21 economies of APEC. Previously, David was a Senior Research Associate at the King Abdullah Petroleum Research Center in Saudi Arabia, where he led projects on energy subsidy price reform and low carbon transition pathways. David also served in the White House Council on Environment Quality in 2010, and he is currently associate editor on one of the Elsevier publication, the Renewable Energy Focus. Wow, David, such a remarkable research experience. Glad to have you here to enrich our discussions. The fourth and the last panelist is Ricardo Gorini. Ricardo is a Senior Program Officer in IRENA. He is responsible for the Renewable Energy Roadmaps program at global, regional, and country level. He is also co-author of the IRENA Global Roadmap series, including the latest Global Renewable Outlook 2050, and contributor to the Post-COVID Recovery Report, which both have been published recently. Previously, he worked in the financial market and mining sector, as well as advisor for energy policies and regulation in Brazil. Ricardo, very happy to have you here as well. So now, with all the panelists lined up are set, I would like to set the scene of our panel discussions. There are 2 keywords that are already highly discussed in ASEAN now, also mentioned in the previous panel discussion by speakers, which are energy transition and also COVID-19. So as we all know, ASEAN is growing rapidly with GDP and population growth among the highest globally. 643 million people and GDP of more than $7 trillion US. However, electrification rates in some countries are still low, fossil fuel use is still high, and the regional target to achieve in 2025 can be a challenge. We understand that energy projects must meet the trifecta of affordability, reliability, and sustainability, and the region is already including this in their projections under the upcoming flagship product by ASEAN Center for Energy and GIZ, the 6th ASEAN Energy Outlook. Having COVID-19 pandemic hit many countries in the world, including most of ASEAN member states for almost a year now, it becomes a question on how will it affect energy transition in the region. And is there any shift of priorities in the countries or regions on their energy policy development? So now I would like to invite every panelist to give you a short opening statement on your perspective. Where are the ASEAN countries now on the journey of energy transitions? And what are the impact of COVID-19 in global energy market that are affecting ASEAN on their energy transition journey? I'd like to invite panelists from the government institution first to give their opinion. I will start with ladies first. Danish Energy Agency, please, Aisma.
Yes, thank you very much, Ricky. Good morning, dear ladies and gentlemen from Copenhagen, Denmark. I'll try to keep this very brief because I'm sure we're going to have much other good discussion coming up as well. I believe there are some very, very positive trends in many of countries in the ASEAN region where the level of ambition towards green transition is increasing, and there is increasing level of concern and also doubt, and maybe also availability of financing towards fossil fuels, in particular coal power plants. And of course, as many other experts on this panel, I'm sure share all this opinion, that we truly hope that the COVID-19 crisis will be giving a much needed kind of kickstart or maybe additional boost to a potential economic recovery that could be strongly rooted in kind of more sustainable energy solutions, renewables that increase the self-sufficiency of the countries, reduce health costs, and definitely put the country on a much more future-proof pathway. I think I'll keep it short in my opening statement here. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Aisma. Now let's hear from UK. I would like to ask Tom. Please, Tom.
Oh yeah, thanks for having me. So I think I would say there's sort of good signs in the region, but we're still some way to go. So there's a risk, I think, from COVID in the recovery that countries pull sort of familiar levers when they're planning recovery and go for coal quick. I think on the positive side, if you look around what's happening this week at Singapore International Energy Week and around it in the region, there's been some good announcements. As Ambassador O'Flaherty said earlier, the Philippines announcement was very positive on the moratorium on coal, and of course Malaysia's Petronas announcing today that they would have a net zero commitment. So that's positive. Singapore itself has been positioning itself for a while, I think, to become a regional hub, and they're obviously the only country in the region so far to announce a long-term strategy towards a commitment to net zero by the middle of the century. So I think there's good sort of signs, but as Aisma said just now, I think the concern is that there is still coal in the pipeline, and we need to discourage that trend. So we were concerned to see the Vung Ang 2 plant approved in Vietnam recently, and it was striking to see the reaction from investors towards investors of that plant. So I think it was, it's a demonstration of the things to come. And I think we also need to see those ambitions, there's that sort of possibility banked into commitments. So in this region, we've seen a few nationally determined contributions announced ahead of COP26 next year, which are positive, and we welcome those, but we think there's space to go further with those as well. And of course, COP26 in the UK next year is a really key moment to sort of seal in the ambition and the trend since Paris, and it's a really key important point for us in the UK. Thanks.
Thank you, Tom. It's interesting to hear from the governments. I'm also interested to hear from the international organizations, from APEC and also IRENA. Let's start with David first. David.
Great. Thank you, Rizky, and thank you everyone for this opportunity. I want to highlight two important and complementary energy goals that are held by the 21 economies of the Asia-Pacific Economic Cooperation. And the first is a goal to reduce energy intensity by 45% between 2005 and 2035. And the second is to double the share of modern renewables between 2010 and 2030. And I think Ricardo did a great job earlier highlighting the importance of renewable share in total final energy consumption. So I just want to highlight sort of these other goals that are active in the region. And from our research at APEC in Tokyo, we have found that APEC member economies are on their way to meeting the energy intensity goal, even before 2030. So that's a great sign. This is, of course, before COVID-19. So we're waiting to see how how this shakes out. But more work needs to be done to double the share of modern renewables, either in accounting on the supply side, but also on the demand side. In our energy demand supply outlook released last year, we found that the energy intensity goal actually supports the renewable share doubling goal by reducing the amount of total energy demanded. And just focusing a little bit on Southeast Asia, we think there's a high potential for lower energy demand across some of the energy intensive sectors. So in industry, in transport, and in buildings. And it's difficult to judge right now. I think the long-term impacts of COVID, we're still experiencing it right now. But I think at least in the short term, we're seeing some impacts in the buildings and transport sectors, given especially international travel, as we're all working from home and not joining in Singapore. So I think we'll have to see how things shake out, but these may be two sectors to keep your eye on. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Last but not least, let's hear from the host of this event, IRENA, Ricardo, please. We still cannot hear you, Ricardo.
Sorry, I was moved so far. So thank you, Rizky. So I think there is one interesting topic I would like to mention here that is very promising in the region. That's what we could call the rising awareness of the importance of renewable energy and the whole energy transition aspects. So this post-COVID recovery is really bringing this topic into the agenda. Everyone is really facing daily lives, all the issues that are related to the post-COVID and the COVID problem. So I think this is something that has a very nice impact in terms of this demystification of renewable, if you like, because that's how things could move faster, and the acceleration is there when the institutions are really well aware of the situation and try to engage as much as possible, from all the government regulators to the private sector, banking, etc. So I think we'll have opportunity to discuss further the technologies and the sectors, but that's a very, very interesting topic as well, those awareness and demystification of renewable energy. So thank you.
Thank you, Ricardo. Thank you all for your opening statements. Now, before I go to the Q&A sessions, I just would like to encourage participants to feel free to ask in the virtual platforms, and I'll try to monitor and direct the question to the panelists from here. Let's start now with the Q&A sessions. To Aisma and Tom, interesting what you said earlier in the opening statements. I'd like to ask furthermore, like departing from the current COVID-19 situations, what do you think are the required near-term actions from the regions that could accelerate clean energy transitions? Maybe to Tom first.
Yeah, thank you. I think I would say three things probably. So the first is stop or review those coal decisions. As we've heard earlier, not only are they incompliant with the Paris commitments, but they don't make economic sense. We need to be transitioning energy 4 times faster if we're to meet the Paris commitments. And by 2022, I think IRENA's data shows 60% of coal plants will be uncompetitive. The announcements by China, Japan and Korea this week make that even more stark. So I think I read the other day that by 2050, only 4% of the coal currently being consumed by China will be consumed. That's it makes it not just a moral choice, but a clear economic choice. So if you look at the markets around the world, that's clearly being factored in. Next era, the US energy company is worth more than Exxon now. Tesla is worth more than Toyota. So those trends are really sort of starting to show. The second thing I think is develop a clear pipeline of energy efficiency and renewable projects. As we heard earlier, and as Ambassador O'Flaherty said, the job creation factor for renewables and energy efficiency is 3 times higher than for fossil fuels. So there's a clear sort of angle for that into the short-term growth. We know that green finance is starting to flow around the region. So last year, 2019, there was $8 billion worth of green bonds issued in the region. as part of about 260 billion globally, but that share of the global total was over double what it was the year before. So we know that that's increasing. But nevertheless, we know that we hear from investors that they struggle to find bankable renewable and energy efficiency projects in the region. So the role of government in opening that pipeline is really vital, I think, and giving investors the confidence that that pipeline will be viable into the future, in contrast to, as I say, about coal. The final thing I think is about grid renewal and adaptation and widening. And I think we've seen at the International Energy Week just now in the last couple of days some interesting developments in ASEAN on that, with Singapore and Malaysia signing a power trading agreement, which is really positive. And also we heard that Singapore, Laos, Thailand and Malaysia will sign a transmission agreement at the ASEAN Energy Ministers meeting in November. So that's a trend of integration around the region is really positive, and I think that should be encouraged, because that is a key enabler of renewable growth. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Tom. I mean, I like what you mentioned about the power grid and also the financing. I mean, those also are already in the pipeline of the ASEAN countries, which they will launch next month, which is the ASEAN Power Plan of Action Corporations. And yes, I think that's already been done in ASEAN, and look forward for those more initiatives from the ASEAN countries for the next 5 years. Go to the ISMA from your point of view.
Thank you, Rizky, and thank you, Tom, for very good points. I also have three that I would probably want to highlight. One is definitely on transmission, and you mentioned regional widening and kind of international integration in the region. On top of that, I would like to add that definitely transmission strengthening nationally in each of the countries is very high on the list. And the reason I'm mentioning this in the near term and in immediate activities that would be recommended is because transmission is inherently very lengthy process. There's planning, there's construction. So basically you need to start yesterday to have things up and running smoothly within, let's say, 10 years period in the future. And of course, the reason transmission is so important that already now transmission bottlenecks or delays in transmission development are kind of acting as an obstacle to large-scale successful integration or even creation of bankable projects that Tom already mentioned. And of course, if the transmission planning is started in a timely manner, it acts almost as importantly as an ever important signal to all those international investors that can provide cost competitive financing that this country or these countries in the region are committed, and this is going to be a low risk investment. So in my view, this is really, really important. The other thing I would like to point out is regulatory framework. I do believe there are still many countries in the ASEAN region where some of the fundamentals of framework of how renewables can be developed is a bit too lengthy. There is too many points of interface, even in consenting and permitting. So many of the features in the regulatory framework, the more we can de-risk that, the more we can shorten down the timelines. The more it can be fair and transparent, the more, again, the countries in the region can attract this much needed additional capital injection at competitive rates that many of those international finance providers can indeed ensure. And one thing I would also like to mention is in some instances, it is not even the problem of developers being able to follow the regulations, even though they can be, let's say, complex and there are too many points of interface. But it's sometimes PPA design that's the issue, for example, where there are risks beyond developers' control that are built into the PPA, such as if there is delay in transmission or if there is TSO imposed curtailment, that there is no guarantee that the developer will be remunerated, and that then makes this project very risky and unbankable from many international developers' perspective. Last one I would like to highlight is, and also building on top of what Tom just mentioned, how the renewable energy sector is much more kind of value adding to local employment. Now, at the same time, this local employment will not always emerge by itself. And this is where investment in skills and competence development from national and centralized perspective can be very useful. So for example, ensuring there is opportunity to gain education, to gain training, so that when these projects do come along, that there are capable people locally who can carry out these jobs. And of course, this will bring great value added to local supply chain development, to employment, and again, make a particular country or particular region much more attractive for very large investments if you know that the supply chain is ready. I think I'll stop here. Thank you.
Thank you, Aisma. I mean, I also have been participated in some of ASEAN subsector networks meetings. I can assure you there's also lengthy procedures in RE development is also one of the things that they are already aware. So hopefully it can be answered by the governments in the futures. Would like now to go to the international organization, to Ricardo and also David. Interesting that you mentioned earlier in your opening statement that, maybe the COVID-19 is not over yet, but what do you think are the key technologies and measures that can be taken by ASEAN countries with regard to their post-COVID recovery plans to accelerate their energy transitions? Maybe to David first.
Great, thanks, Rizky. I only have two things to mention, so I'm breaking the trend here. But first, again, I want to highlight, I think energy efficiency is a key tool in the portfolio of available options. And as we know, efficiency can reduce future energy demand, but also has a very important jobs and economic growth component. And it may be useful for decision makers and other stakeholders to look at experiences around the world, especially in the last big economic crisis in 2008. In the United States, for example, there was a significant energy component to the recovery package. And this is around 2008, 2009. And within that, there was a significant energy efficiency. Within that, there was a significant energy component, and energy efficiency was very important. And I actually worked on one of those programs at the city level, city government. And there were many lessons learned in terms of translating policy at the high level into actionable and workable solutions on the ground. And just as Aisma mentioned, some of these lessons are on developing the local workforce, which is actually very, very key, and especially in terms of getting the economic growth that you're desiring. And so my suggestion is to seek out the relevant lessons, learn from previous experiences, and see how those lessons can be transferred, and especially to the country-specific situations. And the second thing is not actually necessarily something you can install. It's data collection. And as researchers, it is cliche to say that we need more data, but we say it because it's true. And a key effort that countries can do to accelerate and plan for the future is to actually know where they are standing right now, and data can help do that. So developing data collection and statistical capacity is very, very important, and it can help support the value chain of policy analysis and decision making. And just as Aisma mentioned about transmission, it is also essentially a long-term process, and you really would have liked to start yesterday. And so making these upfront investments in terms of training and skills development will lead to future gains over time. And so the sooner you get started on that, the sooner you can realize those potential gains. I think I'll stop there, but happy to expand more later on.
Thank you, David. I also would like to hear more from IRENA perspective. Ricardo, please.
Thank you, Rizky. So very, very valuable points from David, Tom, and Aisma. Very nice discussion. So I just want to echo and perhaps it's quite important to mainstream renewable energy and these energy transition technologies. So the power system flexibility and the grid reinforcement with all the components in transmission and distribution, this is indeed vital. This is essential for the transformation. So as we saw in the different scenarios, solar and wind is about to increase fast and with an important number. Maybe in IRENA we have around from 20 to 120. So that's quite an increase. So this flexibility is very important. So this is the first topic I would like to mention. Together with this, the electrification of end-use sectors. So the end-use sectors, not just electrification of the transport sector, but as much as possible all the other sectors. And of course, the bioenergy and the potential in the region is quite important. So developing the markets. So we need really to increase the market penetration of bioenergy, and why not to explore the opportunities that are there in terms of exports. So that's from my side. Thank you. Back to you, Rizky.
Thank you, Ricardo. Actually, I have a lot of more questions. Also, there's questions from the participants, but I just got a message from the organizer that we are bound by time. Just like what, thank you very much to all panelists. It has been an interesting discussion. However, before I close this panel discussion, I would like to ask every panelist on your final statement that looking at the regional and countries activities, where do you see the biggest opportunity for organizations such as yours, IRENA, GIZ, ACE, and others in the regions can work hand in hand to encourage countries or regions to shift more energy transition, and particularly on renewable energy? Maybe I would like to start from David first then.
Sure, I think just in closing, I mean, I think coming from an international research organization, the way we can help engage is by helping stakeholders and governments understand their situation and try to plan for the future. And we can do this through developing technical skills and working hand in hand with researchers and folks in different government ministries to really help identify the suite of policy options and how to best assess those so that they meet the objectives of the different countries and also the regional aspirations.
Thank you, David. Can I ask also then Tom to continue?
Yeah, hi. So, I mean, as I think many will know, the UK has got a long history in Southeast Asia, and a large diplomatic network with a substantial development program here. But I think the really important thing to emphasise for now is that we are hosting in partnership with Italy next year the next COP. And that is a really key moment for the global community. So we have this new cooperation agreement with ASEAN to support our capacity building and sharing of good practice amongst that community. And we really see ASEAN as playing a really important role at that event next year. There are two key things coming up which will really support the region on that. So the first is that we announced our COP president designate recently announced an energy transition council, which we hope will sit in the next few months, which is designed to bring together donor countries and countries that need international climate finance to really pinpoint where that assistance can be targeted, and then increase the capacity of the international system to stand up to those demands. And the other thing I think is worth mentioning is that, as our Prime Minister announced in UN General Assembly earlier this month, on the 12th of December, we are hosting with UN Secretary General an ambition summit on the 12th of December, which is, of course, the 5th anniversary of the Paris Agreement. And that is a really key moment for countries to come forward and fire the starting gun for the 11 months ahead towards COP26. And we really hope that we'll have a really successful event with countries committing to higher ambition ahead of COP. Thanks.
Thank you, Tom. I also would like to ask IRENA now. Also, we also in ACE and GIZ before we had this partner coordination meeting, which also actually implementation of this coordinated meeting among the partner and also organization, and one of them are IRENA. So yeah, Ricardo, can you also give your opinion on that?
Thank you very much, Rizky. Thank you all for this participation. Very happy to be here as well again. So the IRENA is indeed engaging with the region. So, and this is very, very interesting from our side. So we have a kind of portfolio of actions ongoing. So I would like to mention the renewable energy roadmaps. So we are ongoing, have ongoing discussions, and that's support the ASEAN Renewable Outlook next year. We have the flexibility studies that are part of this initiative as well, and also the socioeconomics, as you heard from Michael as well. But I would like also to mention the policy and regulation discussions, so the RA's discussion. So we have a kind of set of portfolio that we are discussing, engaging with countries, and I would like to thank you especially to ACE on this partnership. So thank you all for this, and back to you, Rizky.
Thank you, Ricardo. Last but not least, Aisma.
Yes, thank you. And I very much agree with all the points that the previous panelists have mentioned. There's maybe one feature of the way Danish Energy Agency and the Danish Energy Partnership programs carry out our kind of engagements that I would really like to highlight and maybe also recommend in a way, is that we really try to engage with our partners, and that's both governmental partners and kind of local energy experts. And we try to make sure that all of those engagements have a capacity development element in there. So for example, when we make the Vietnam Energy Outlook report, we make sure that all of the modeling and actual physical models and even servers, they stay with our Vietnamese partners, that there is comprehensive training so that when we leave, this knowledge stays with the country. And generally, what I personally, in my experience, have found very powerful is that when you make the cases and knowledge you share as tangible as you possibly can. So for example, we also engage the Danish TSO Energinet. We take actual Danish experts to Vietnam to maybe show on, very practical level how Denmark can integrate more than 50% of variable renewable generation in the power system, and sometimes it goes over 100% in Denmark. So yeah, I would say focus on sustainable capacity development and try to make things as real and as tangible as you possibly can. Thank you.
Thank you, Isma. I also am happy to say that from my experience, I have been working with APERG as well, and IRENA, and also the Danish Energy Agency in some ASEAN countries, especially Indonesia. So very happy to have the cooperation with you and look forward to more collaboration with you. Before I end this panel discussion, allow me to summarize our discussion, maybe also presentation before here. When in the pre-COVID-19 pandemic, the trend of energy transition toward low carbon sources were positive. ASEAN countries' adoption of wind, solar, storage, and electric vehicle was rapidly accelerating. However, COVID-19 has changed the strategy for many governments in any given country, including ASEAN's. The severity of the outbreak is influencing the form of substantial economic measures. An aspect of the stimulus decisions in turn might affect the speed and trajectory of energy transition in surprising ways. Nevertheless, ASEAN in particular have weathered the COVID-19 relatively well when viewed through the lens of health, social, and economic impact, and their actions are sufficiently strong to adopt creative and forward-looking COVID-19 stimulus plan. That being said, and also improvement on the cost competitiveness of renewables in the regions in recent years, the future of energy transitions in these regions, I would say, is still bright. Allow me then to close this panel discussion. I would like to thank all the panelists for your thought and interesting discussions. Hope you all have same feeling with me. Thank you to IRENA for conducting this roundtable, and I'd like to give the floor back to Adam. Back to you, Adam. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Fauzianto and all the panelists, the distinguished participants. We have come to the end of our session. Allow me to express our highest appreciation to all of the participants for a very focused and forward-looking exchange of views, and as well as to all of the speakers, the panelist moderators. Thank you very much for the very insightful information.